could really see the key piece to turning everything around was being myself and daring to do that, because for all of my life I had lived in fear, and it was that fear that stopped me from expressing myself, from being the being that I am, who I'm here to be. That got in my way and I didn't. So I absolutely saw that moving through out of that fear and stepping into loving myself, trusting the universe, trusting who I am. So Dare to Be You is very much about that. It's kind of, be who you are here to be.
Today's guest is Debra Simmons. Debra's life involves escaping from an abusive relationship, turning her life around, and helping her children find their happy place in spite of all they've been through, and building a successful business, Dare2bu. Absolutely love the name.
Thank you.
Where Debra helps amazing clients to do the same thing their way. Dare2bu is all about helping you find your way to knowing all of who you truly are, both as a human and a spiritual being, and daring to follow your heart, your own inner knowing, and your individual humanness. And from there, consciously creating your best unique life, a life that excites and lights you up. Welcome, Debra.
Oh, thank you very, very much for having me. I'm really excited about this.
Thank you for being here. I'm excited for this conversation. Now, after reading that, what is one of the most courageous things that you have done?
I think the most courageous thing that I have ever done was forgive myself. I can expand on that if you would like me to.
Absolutely.
So I was in an abusive relationship, and my children suffered a lot. They went through a lot. They were they were not treated well, and they didn't, there was a lot of things that went on in my household that I am ashamed that happened. And when I escaped that relationship, one of my nieces actually confronted me and said that I didn't ever deserve to be happy because of what my children had been through.
Wow.
And I could absolutely see that on the one hand, I could see what she was saying. I could see the truth of what I had allowed my children to go through, what I had allowed to happen. But equally, I could see that if I didn't forgive myself, if I didn't find my happy place and, truly step into being who I am now, then they would continue to suffer. So I had to find it within me, in spite of everything that I had done and been a part of. I had to find it within me to forgive myself, so that we could all find our way out.
Wow. And that's really brave as well, and courageous. Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, there was a pivotal moment there where I could have given up. I remember, sobbing and crying and thinking, I can't do this. It's too hard. I'm not good enough. I'm not enough. And then having to find it within myself to stand up and to carry on and to become a beacon of light and something that my children could be proud of, someone that they could turn to.
Absolutely beautiful. So what was the turning point?
It was that forgiveness. And what actually happened was, there was a point in my relationship where I sent my eldest daughter to live with my sister because it was too dangerous for her to live at home. And at that point, rather than leaving the relationship, I stayed in the relationship and sent my beloved daughter away, sent her to live with my sister. So she lived with her cousin, my niece. And then when I eventually escaped the relationship, when I got out, my daughter and I were building our relationship back up and, reconnecting. And I was stepping into being someone different. I was, finding a new life, finding myself. And it was that moment when that happened, when my niece confronted me and said that I didn't deserve happiness, I didn't deserve a new life.
Mm-hmm.
And then my daughter, in a separate conversation, my daughter said to me, please, Mum, please, you're, who you're being now. I'm so proud of you. Please don't go back there. And that was the moment. It was like, I can't let my daughter down again. I've let my children down so many times. I cannot let her down again. I have got to dare to be me. I have got to step into that, because I could see my whole life, I'd been a people pleaser. I'd had this idea from a very, very young age that I wasn't good enough. I couldn't be me. That wasn't enough. And by not being me, I got into all this trouble and caused all this pain and hurt and upset. And it was like, no, it's time to be you, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to talk more about Dare to Be You. But yeah, I can understand why you've created that as your business. It is
Yes.
our experiences that create our reality. And therefore, that's where we start thinking, okay, there must be other people out there.
Mm.
So, yeah, that's absolutely, I mean, despite everything, like you've said, you've been through a lot, you've done that. And forgiveness is the one thing that allows, once you forgive yourself, it opens up to possibilities. Absolutely.
I was just saying, yeah, forgiveness is a huge key to moving forward, whether that is self-forgiveness. I think it's a mixture of self-forgiveness and forgiving other people. So, yeah.
Yes, and it's so important to heal and reconnect with our authentic selves. Do you want to just touch a bit about that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I found myself in that position, I had no idea who I was. I had
Mm-hmm.
no idea what food I liked, what colors I liked, how I liked to dress. I had so lost touch with listening to myself and
Mm-hmm.
knowing, I wouldn't even, if somebody said to me, do you want to go to the beach? Do you want to go shopping? I was like, it would be, I had been so used to being, well, what do you like? What do you want to do? And I will go along with that. I had squashed any of my own discernment, any of my own knowing of what I liked. So absolutely, that was a huge reconnection for me that had to happen on all levels.
Yeah.
I wasn't connected with my body. I wasn't listening to, if I was ill, I wasn't listening to my feelings. It was all just squash it down, squash it down, squash it down. And what, whoever I was with, who do you need me to be? What do you need me to do? And so reconnecting, kind of beginning to look at things like colors and clothes and my hair and my behavior and all of those, who am I and who is it that I actually want to be in the world? What do I want to stand for? What do I believe in? Which is why it's such, for me, a part of my business is it's so important for me to, I stand as a beacon of light, as a way, but absolutely to light up for whoever I am working with what their path is. Not, I don't want someone to be a carbon copy of me. I want someone to find, if somebody has a completely different way of looking at the world to me, then keep looking at the world that way. Be the person that sees what you see in the world, because we are all unique aspects of the divine. And we have our own ways of being, ways of seeing, ways of showing up, the colours that we like, who we are, what we stand for. And to me, it is vitally important that we go inside and really see that for ourselves and connect to that for ourselves. Because when we are truly connected to that, then what we do in the world, the impact we have, the people that we touch, it's just unbelievable what can happen from there. You can probably tell I'm quite passionate about that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you kind of preempted some of my next question. That was my next question. Tell me more about Dare to be You, and what does that involve, Deborah?
Well, so clearly,
Yeah.
Dare2bu came from me,
Mm.
the forgiveness of myself for not
Mhm.
being me, for not daring to step into, not daring to ask myself, what do you like? What do you stand for? Um, and so I could see that all of the things, how it had played out in my life, and when the people I work with, I
Mhm.
see that it plays out in different ways. Some
Yeah.
people become physically ill. Some people, I got into an abusive relationship. It shows up in our lives in a multitude of ways when we're not being ourselves, when we're not going inside and asking, who am I? How do I want to show up? I could really see the key piece to turning everything around was being myself and daring to
Mhm.
do that, because
Mm.
for all of my life I had lived in fear, and it was that fear that stopped me from expressing myself, from
Mhm.
being the being that I am, who I'm here to be. That got in my way and I didn't. So I absolutely saw that moving through, out of that fear and stepping into loving myself, trusting the universe, trusting who I am. So Dare to be You is very much about that. It's kind of, be who you are here to be. Feel into that.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah. I mean, because in my podcast, I shared my story, and
Yeah.
that was a part
Wow.
of me that I needed to share, because it got to a stage where actually I lost my brother, and I thought life's too
Mm.
short. He's
Yes.
my
Yeah.
peer group, 2 years older than me. And I thought, no, I can't do this anymore. I
Mm.
don't want to lie. I want to be authentically me and take it
Absolutely.
or leave it.
Yeah, I listened to your story, and wow, we all have, our stories are so powerful, aren't they?
Mm,
In leading and sort of saying, and I think, like, in a similar way, you weren't being yourself, and so we kind of get pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed
mm,
until it breaks, and we're sort of like, actually, I have to step into being me, don't I? And
absolutely.
when we step into being that, it I call my company Dare to be You, because at
Hmm.
first, initially, when we have been hiding, when we haven't been showing up, when we have been lying to ourselves in one sense and others, it's scary at first. It takes some courage, it takes some daring to say, no, do you know what? I'm gonna own who I am and stand up and say, this is me, and that's okay. I'm perfect, I'm amazing, I bring something to the world. So yeah, kudos to you too. An amazing story. Mm.
Thank you. And absolutely, that's what we do. And like you say, is stepping into, the power really. It's
Mm.
so actually powerful, actually, just to be you. And that doesn't mean you have to have gone through a story or anything, just to be you. That's it. I mean, like you say, your whole brand is Dare to be You. Mine is Create the Courage to be Fearless, because that's what I had to do,
Yeah.
and yeah, courage plays so much in our lives. If you possibly can, what would you say is the most important lesson you've learned over your life so far? I have to say so far.
Yeah, I got plenty more living to do. Wow.
Absolutely.
What is the most important lesson? I guess it ties into that, isn't it? It is the
Hmm.
most important lesson I have learned is be true to myself. Um,
Hmm.
because I can see the times when when I'm not being myself, it's through fear.
Hmm.
If I have something to say or something to share or a way of being in the world, and I don't do that, it's because I am fearful. And what I
Hmm.
see is when I live from that, when I show up fearfully, then life doesn't work out very well for me or anyone else. And yet when I show up when I have that courage and I actually show up as me and I am more honest, vulnerable potentially, then actually life works much better from there. And being a people pleaser, I'm not a people pleaser to anywhere near the extent that I was, but it is somewhere that I can go at times, and it is this fear that comes in that says, this person won't like you, this person won't approve of you, this person won't like what you're doing. And so that then leads into me not showing up as me and how I want to be. And I have seen there are too many lived experiences for me of seeing what happens on the end of that. I end up somewhere I don't want to be. It just does not work. Absolutely. And yet in those moments when I find the courage, like exactly that you're talking about, when I dare to be me and I find that courage and I show up, and it's never about treading anyone else down or disagreeing or being, it's always coming from a place of love within me. And when I do that, what happens, even though in the moment it might be a little bit scary, what ends up happening, what actually plays out, is to the benefit of everybody involved. Yes. So that has been my biggest lesson. Do not listen to that fear.
I cannot agree more. Absolutely. Yes. So as we talk about, you were people pleasing, how did you find to setting and reinforcing boundaries? Did that play a big part in your life?
I think for me, as I began to understand, I came across a spiritual understanding known as the 3 principles, which I know that you know a little bit about. So beginning to understand how my experience was created, the part that my own thinking and me, the part that I played in that, beginning to see that more and more clearly, it made sense to me. It felt to me like I didn't set boundaries. It felt like as I grew and changed, those boundaries were naturally there. I know when I first got out of my relationship, when I was doing some work, I was in a women's refuge and I was doing some work in the refuge, and they were talking about boundaries. And although it was a nice idea and I liked it, I liked the thought of doing that, I just couldn't. I hadn't got that courage yet. And yet, as I deepened my understanding of the part that I was playing, who I was being, how that was influencing everything, and as I gradually began to change as a person, it was like those boundaries were naturally in place. They showed up, saying no and showing up as myself and expressing myself as I wanted to do it, was a natural byproduct of understanding. As the more I understood, the more that I could do that. And yet trying to do that, when in my mind, when I had the belief that I wasn't good enough, then just trying to show up as someone that was good enough didn't work for me. But as I began to understand more of who I am, who we all are, that about my spiritual nature, about the deeper truth of life, it was obvious to me, well, of course you're good enough. And so then, like showing up here and speaking to you all those years ago, I couldn't have done that because I would have just been too self-conscious. I would have been too, my mind would have been full of, are you saying the right thing? Is this coming across right? And all of that.
Absolutely.
Whereas now from a knowing that there will be somebody, I am here for a reason. There will be somebody who hears this, who hears the message that you're bringing, who hears what's going on there, who will be impacted by this. So I can lean into and trust that and be myself. I know that however this comes across, whatever happens here, it is more than good enough for the purpose for which it is being created by something greater than me.
Brilliant. Absolutely love it.
Cool.
So I know a bit about your project. Tell me more about your latest project. Play project is the Field of Dreams. Tell me more about that.
Well, so this is an interesting one. One of the things that I like to do, I want to say the words that are coming to me, so I'm going to say them because that's what's in my mind. I insist for myself is that I walk my talk.
Okay.
You know, when I work with people, when I show up on these kinds of interviews, I don't like to share things that I think are a good idea. I like to be sharing things that I have lived experience of, that I know it works this way, and that if you look in this direction and have your own experiences of this, that you will see this for yourself. I had this idea, I've had this idea for many years, that I wanted to buy some land and build a house. And you know, all those years ago when it first occurred to me, I kind of thought, well, you're just mad, forget it. And I kind of, just pushed it away. And it kept coming back, as these things do, you know, when we are called to something, it kept coming back. And then about 18 months ago, I think it was, I actually went to see a piece of land not far from where I'm living here, about 5 or 10 minutes from where I am here. It's actually an agricultural barn with a garden. It's a building plot, basically, a rather nice building plot. Nice. Came on the market and I went to see it. And I just was not in a position to buy this land. I didn't have the money in the bank. I was not in a position to get the money. I was not in it. But the minute that I stepped onto this land, I was like, wow, this is where I'm going to live. This is my home. This is mine. I just had a deep knowing of that. And the estate agent said, oh my gosh, this is quite a sought after plot. If you want it, put in an offer quite quickly. And I sort of made all the right noises, but I was absolutely not in a position to do that. So I went away and I just decided, I was playing with creation. I had seen how I had totally recreated myself. I'd recreated my family. I was having impact. I could see that who I was showing up as was changing this. So I kind of asked myself the question, who would I need to be to own this land and to build a house on this land? And I just sat with that and I just left it. I left it to the power behind life, mind, God, the universe, whatever is your word. I was just like, I'm ready to step into this. What do I need to do? And then it was practically 12 months later, almost to the day, actually, which was kind of a little bit spooky too, that my partner said to me, oh, you remember that barn that we went to see? I think it's still up for sale. And we looked and it hadn't sold. And so we just booked another appointment to go and view it. And all sorts of things had happened in that year. And when we went to view it, we hadn't got the money, that the asking price of this barn, but we had got a substantial chunk of money. So while we were there, I just had this crazy idea to offer the money that we had.
Why not?
Exactly, which was considerably less than the asking price. And so I did while we were there at the barn. Unfortunately, that offer wasn't accepted. The vendor said that if I upped the offer by £10,000, then they would say yes. But unfortunately, I didn't have £10,000. But something in me decided to say yes. So I said, absolutely, we will up our offer by £10,000. Started looking down the back of the sofa cushions. I was kind of, oh my gosh. Yeah. And then it became a project. It became the Field of Dreams. There was something, actually it was somebody that I was speaking to said, if you say yes, it will happen. It's like the Field of Dreams. And so that became the name. And then I got on lots of conversations with people. I realized that it was time for me to step up in my business, to be more visible, to create this money that was needed own this land. And here we are. And on December the 1st, 2023, the sale went through. I had created the £10,000 that we were short. And the land now belongs to us. And so
wow. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I am in the process now of asking myself the questions, who do I need to step into being so that I can build this house, continue with this creation? And I am having a blast. I'm having a ball. Actually, we are actually planning to physically do as much of the build as we can. So it's not, I'm project managing, I'm showing up, getting myself absolutely up to my neck in mud and clearing the land so I'm physically doing the build, and I'm also running my business, stepping up, being more visible, showing up to create what is needed to step into being who I need to be, daring to be someone who can do this.
Wow.
So it's really exciting.
That's absolutely exciting. I'm excited for you. Wow.
It is really, really exciting. It definitely lights me up, brings me on. I love to get my hands dirty. I'm definitely a do person. I like to be doing. That's definitely, I realize with stepping into who I am, that is absolutely who I am. I love it.
Absolutely. And like they say, build it, they will come.
Yes.
Field of dreams. Oh, wow.
Like around that latest project, I've made that a part of my business, sharing, because obviously my business was based on something I had already done. I was in this terrible place. I completely changed. And then I started talking to people and talking about how we can change. And the Field of Dreams, actually, I'm sharing that. I've got videos on YouTube, and I'm doing something called the Creators Circle, where I'm sharing really, really raw and real how I'm stepping into this in real time.
Wow.
The fears that come up, when we were in the position, it was like I was going to have to find £10,000 more than I had got, and solicitors were doing things, and sometimes the fear would be, oh my gosh, could I end up going to prison because I've agreed to pay this money and I haven't got it? What will happen? The fears that came. And so alongside my business, what I'm doing to partly to fund the build, partly to, I see there are so many people that have dreams that they would like to step into. So I'm sharing what I see and how I am creating this as possible, which, that's really lighting me up. So I'm loving doing that. Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited. Definitely. Yeah.
We have some fun calls talking about, the mud and our mind. When we show up as the person who can do that, what happens, and what happens when we get lost in the fear too.
Absolutely. And it's all fun and games.
It is all part of the process, all part of this amazing journey that we call life.
Yes, absolutely beautiful. I look forward to hearing more about that in the coming weeks and months.
Well, I'm usually all over Facebook and YouTube and places sharing, so
that's excellent. So what resources do you recommend, tools, daily tips to anyone that wants to start looking within when navigating change?
Well, I think there are lots and lots of books and teachers and amazingly beautiful people out there. Your podcasts like this are a great resource, I think. And there are plenty like YouTube and lots of resources. So what I would recommend is listening to, going back over the episodes you've made and other podcasts and other YouTube channels and all kinds of things like this. And if someone really resonates with you, reach out to have a further conversation, connect in a more deeply, find out of ways of maybe working with that person. Always trust your own knowing. If something feels off or wrong, then leave it alone for now.
Mm.
And as I said, there are so many free resources where we can get a taste of something. So if we taste something, it's a bit like a buffet, isn't it? And if you could kind of have a spoonful of something, and if you think, yeah, I like that, I'm going to go back for a bit more, then go back for more and see. But the minute it starts to taste a little bit off, the minute it's not right, step back a bit.
Yes.
Because there are so many beautiful, helpful, kind, wonderful people out there. But to me, it's the key point is that resonance, because nobody is, who you are is what is important. And if somebody isn't pointing you back to being you, then it's not going to work. So it's so important to that looking within going. So if someone is pointing, if someone is saying, oh, I know more than you, I'm better than you, run a mile.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
but if someone is saying, yeah, I've gone inside, I will talk to you about going inside, I will guide you to the best of my ability, then that to me is where it's at.
That's brilliant. So Debra, where can the listeners find you online, your book? What's your website?
Okay, so I have written a book, Dare to Be You, and it's the number 2, the letter B and the letter U. Dare to Be You is how it's written. So yeah, I wrote the book. That was very much in those early stages when I was first really seeing stuff having come out of my relationship. So that is available on Amazon and it's available on my website. My website is dare2bu.co.uk. I'm on Facebook, Debra Simmons. I'm on YouTube, Debra Simmons. And I'm sure, through this podcast, I'm sure there will be something below here, or I'm sure Anita will be able to point you in my direction. I always love to hear from people. I love knowing what people have heard in anything I've said. So absolutely feel free to reach out to me.
Yes, all your links will be in the show notes.
Cool.
Thank you for sharing your courageous journey and your deep, insightful wisdom and knowledge with us today. And by doing so, I know you have helped so many others. Debra Simmons.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I just want to acknowledge you, Anita, for the work that you are doing, for this podcast that you are producing, for how you facilitate and allow the space for these conversations. What you are doing in the world is amazing. So I would like to acknowledge you and thank you for this space and allowing me to share in this way. Like you said, I think you are impacting a lot of people with what you do. So thank you very, very much for being you, for daring to be you and finding that courage.
Thank you. Heartfelt thank you, Debra. That means a lot to me. Thank you. So we are all about create the courage to be fearless. So my final question to you is, what is your definition of courage?
I think that would be living from love, not fear. And how I would describe that would be looking truthfully at who you are. And you do that by looking at your life, looking at the people in your life, what's going on, what your relationship's like, what is your financial situation, what is your working situation. When we look honestly at what that is, and then allowing ourselves to be guided to change that if change is needed.